Yeah. Chicken or crow, chicken or crow.
Hey everyone, it's been a while since I made a video about anything really, so since April has arrived, it reminded me I really should make a video. It's really kind of a dead time for me. I'm waiting for the draft. I've put the combine information in the MarketShare database, obviously. I have received a few notes, a few about things that people would like to see added or things that don't seem to be looking up right. There's some USC players that are coming up as a different team, and the broad jump and vertical seem to be the same data right now, so I got some things to correct. But I was actually talking to someone on Patreon the other day, talking about how life, the universe, and everything gets in the way of just playing with data when you're trying to learn it. And I realized that I haven't made a video in a while, like a how-to or a simple let's get used to manipulating data type video. So I thought I'd try and do a video on one of the functions. I've got a how-to video on YouTube of how to use it, but maybe like a demonstration of what you can use it for, and also adding in some running back information from this year's draft class. I thought that might be fun. A little more fun than just me talking about updating the database. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. What I've actually done is, I think I'll put it in the comments when I post this video. There'll be a link to a Google Sheet that I'm going to be using, and you can use the same one to practice, see, get the information for yourself, whatever. And I'm going to link it to how I think one way I use the database that you all have, obviously, to find information out or answers to questions. So I'm listening to a podcast and I hear JJ Zachariason say running backs who finished with a 25% of the rushing market share, whatever, in their last season have a so-and-so hit rate. Instead of relying on just the names he has the time to shout out, what you can do is go to the database, eliminate all the columns, but for that one, after you make a copy, and then see how many prospects in this class exactly have that kind of market share in their final season, or have ever done since 2000, to kind of give you the data that he's talking about. And that's what I do with it a lot. It's not complicated to do at all. It doesn't require testing or advanced Google Sheet or Excel skills. And again, where I've been speaking with people talking about how they want to, but everything seems to get in the way. I was planning to do this for myself, because I've got a lot on my plate right now. I know I look like a scary, hairy madman right now. Sorry about that. But I thought it might be relaxing for me just to play around with some data for a while, and I thought it could for you too. It's literally an exercise that will take you 5 minutes. Also, especially once you get used to the command, and like I say, give you some useful information about this year's draft class, and a way to compare it to past draft classes, past running backs that hit or didn't in the NFL, and get used to a very useful yet seldom described formula, or whatever you want to call those things you write in Excel to get you information. I call them formulas. I think some other people call them different things. So let me skip to it here. Like I say, in the comments section of the video that I'm going to post, I'll post a link to this sheet I've just put out on Google Sheet. I've just got it running back receptions, but call it whatever you like. Now what I do when I post these days is I actually post them as protected sheets. That's just because I don't want to keep having to edit any corrections or information other people put in. And so all you have to do, and this is the same with a MarketShare database, is go to File and then make a copy. And then when you make a copy of it, you can call it whatever you want, and it saves it on your Google Drive, which everyone has. They're free. And that's how you use Google Sheets. And then from there you can do anything you like with it. You can delete any information, you can add information, you can combine it with other information, or you can just stare at it. It's really up to you. So this will be what you get. It's this sheet, and it's got all the running backs in my database from 2000. I just included the games played, rushing attempts, and I'll show you why in a minute, and also the number of receptions they had in each of their seasons by age as well. And again, that's exactly the same. Like if you go to let's go the long way around, shall we? If you go to, you probably have hopefully have the link saved, but if not, if you go to my timeline and you follow a link through again to Patreon, where you can click on the link to get to the market share database in Google Sheets the same way. What you can do is go to File, come on, wake up. Go to File and go down to this Make a Copy section, and just in case you haven't been doing that, or you've been wondering why you're no longer able to filter columns, it's because I'm posting all of these as protected sheets, so I don't have to keep editing them if someone else makes a change. You can just make a copy for yourselves, and then everything that you do to it is just for you. No one else can see it unless you share the link. And then that's easier for you and it's easier for me. So again, it's just File, go down to Make a Copy. And once you've made a copy, you can do that over and over again. You can keep going through the same link. You'll come back to this one, you make a copy, change it however you like. If you screw it up or make a change or get rid of data that you might want later, it's okay, because you can go back through, make another copy. And literally what I've done for the sheet I'm going to post for this video is just delete all the columns apart from the games played, running backs, the rushing attempts, and the number of receptions they had. So that's one thing I wanted to get out there in a video, but it's too small to really make a video about, so I thought I'd just include it in a few, including this one. So yeah, File menu, make a copy, then you can do whatever you like with it over and over again, which will be fun, right? So yeah, this is a sheet. Once if you don't like working online, like working on Google Sheets, the other thing you can do is go to the File menu, and you can download as, and you can just download it as an Excel sheet, and then it's just a file on your computer, right? That's how I work with most of these stuff, and then I just upload it to Google Sheets so I can share it. All the commands that I'm going to go through, or I've ever gone through, actually work exactly the same. All the little formulas I've mentioned in Google Sheets as in Excel. That's what makes them so easy to upload and download from Google Sheets. So let me look at it in Excel here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit and get rid of the ticker tape bar over here, just because I know it can be hard to see in a streaming video. So I was on the Superflex Super Show this week, and I was on there with Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies, and one of the things he likes to mention is that running backs with 20 receptions or more in multiple seasons have a very strong hit rate from what he's looked at. And I think it's a fine data point, a fine observation. And so while I was there, I just did a quick formula and told him how many running backs fit that criteria from this draft class that I currently have data on. And it occurred to me that that's something that's really easy to do. And it's definitely a function, if you're not familiar with it, that you could get use out of if you get familiar with it. So I'm just going to title the column here, number of seasons with 20 receptions, right? That's what we're looking for. Do a little formatting here so it looks neat. Pardon me. And then re-add the filters so that all the data stays together. All right. So the what do you call it? The formula I'm going to use is count if. So I'm going to do count. Choose the word count and then if, and then a bracket, and then I'm going to select all the ages at which this player played, 18 to 23. So in that range, I want to know how many they had over 20, how many they had over 20 receptions. Now, because we're using this little over symbol, or over or equals to, why not? Because 20 counts. But because we're using this little symbol here, let me zoom in again, or not, right? The greater than sign and the equal sign, we have to put it in quotation marks, which is literally just in case you don't know, shift, and then the key right next to enter on both sides of it, and end the bracket. So what I've told it to do is to search these columns for any number that is 20 or greater than 20. And click enter, and this player has no seasons where he had more than 20 receptions, which is fine. And then I'm going to double click the little green box at the bottom here, and it's going to do the same thing for every single player in the database. And so what we've got is a very simple count of how many players have had seasons, or how many seasons all of these players had over 20 receptions. Great. And so if we look over at the left, we can see all these different players in different draft classes, drafted in different places, that met that mark. I also want to do seasons with 30 receptions, because that's an interesting mark as well, right? If you're getting 30 receptions, and that's the other thing we mentioned on the show, then you probably are showing a decent sign that you have receiving ability, and the NFL might notice it and therefore use you in that role. So just to make things simple here, I'm going to copy the formula, put it in, but I'm going to change the limit to 30. I want to know how many seasons I had over 30 receptions. And then filter it large to small again. And so again, that's one very simple way. And if we're just interested in 2019 class, we can select the filter on draft year just to include the 2019 class. And what we see is the only players with multiple 20 receptions or more seasons are all right here. So these are the only players in 2019 class in my database, to be fair. There could be a few missing, but they're the only ones with 2 or more seasons where they caught 20 receptions or more over Zach Reed's hit rate category. So it's James Williams, David Montgomery, Max Weber, Darrell Henderson, and did Trayvon Williams make it? Yeah, Trayvon Williams and Alexander Madison. Not even Justice Hill got up to 20 receptions in multiple seasons. He only did it in one, but he also had one season with over 30. The other thing I was thinking about showing you all is how to add on to that. Like, that's interesting, but how about we give it some context, right? So what's how many seasons did they have over 100 touches? Greater or equal to 100 rushing attempts, let's say. So I'll use the same formula, count if, but instead of selecting the reception section, I'm going to go over and select the rushing attempt section from age 18 to 23, and then use the same over or greater than symbol, but I'm going to put 100 in there because I want to know how many seasons they had over 100 touches. And then something that I do always forget, where I don't format these as tables, I just use the filter function. Sometimes if you don't have a filter, like if I didn't have a filter on this, for example, I just had all these columns filtered, and then you try and sort by this column, this one remains static, which means if you just have numbers in there, the numbers get misaligned to the wrong players. And where I still have the formulas in here, it's still working, but it's something to watch out for when you're playing with sheets, that you don't, if you're filtering, like telling the sheet to organize itself by one of the columns, make sure all the columns in the database have that filter function on there. Otherwise, the data is going to get misaligned, and it's really frustrating to try and put it back in order, 7 steps afterwards when you forget all the different filterings you did. All right. So the reason that I was wondering how many seasons I had over 100 rushing attempts, and you could also do this where you made a separate column, like you could add in 4 or 5 columns here, and then do age 18 rush attempts plus age 18 receptions, and then you'd have a touches column, right? I don't have that built in, but it's easy enough to do. Should we do that? All right, let's do that, just in case. So an easy way to add columns, by the way, just select the number of columns that you want, right click, and click insert, and that exact same number will come up. So instead of receptions or attempts, we're going to do touches. Just keep the formatting the same here. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. And all I want to know is age 18 rushing attempts plus age 18 receptions. Now, the cool thing about Google Sheets and Excel is that if you don't use the little pound symbol that I've talked about in my how-to videos, then however many you drag that formula, and I'll do that slower. if you just grab the cell that you just put that attempts plus receptions in there, grab the little green box in the bottom right corner and drag it, it will move them exactly the same number. So now age 19 is 19 rushing attempts and 19 receptions, and it's just a neat time saver. Now the reason we're getting a value error here, again, probably teaching you to suck eggs, is because there's nothing in age 22. And 0 plus 0 isn't a value, so it doesn't recognize it. This goes back to another simple function, if error. I'm just going to tell it to return a 0. Why not? And again, you can look at the how-to video on my YouTube page to see how to do that in slow motion. But just for the sake of ease, because I wasn't planning on doing this, I'm just going to do it. Then again, I selected all those cells, double-clicked, and now it's doing it for every player. So I'm going to turn those into numbers. Again, there's a how-to video on that. And instead of just looking at rushing attempts, I'm going to say how many seasons did they have over 100 touches? Just so we're getting all the signal in there. Send the formula back down. All right. So now what I want to know is what percentage of seasons, right, did they have over 100 touches and over 20 receptions? Because if I'm thinking of Miles Sanders, right? If Miles Sanders wasn't playing behind Saquon Barkley, he probably would have had a different touch share in that offense while Barkley wasn't there in the offense, right? So it's a little unfair to judge him based on, I think, when Saquon Barkley is there. He did fairly well in his last season. He got over 20 receptions, I think. We'll have a look. So maybe percentage will give us some more information about running backs from the past and also the next draft class. So, whoops. Drag it over. Percentage of seasons with 20 receptions and 100. You could call it something a lot snappier. Touches, obviously. And then all I have to do is take the number of seasons with 20 receptions and divide it by the number of seasons with over 100 touches. And that's now touches, not rushing attempts. I like to make sure I'm renaming my columns as I go if I change things, because I lose track, frankly. Then I'm going to format it as a percentage. And you don't have to use format for that. You could just also do times 100, right? But anyway. So, use the if error function. Because if any of those, like if they never had over 100 touches, and they never had 20 receptions, and it's going to return an error because you're timesing by 0. All right, so let's add that filter column back in here. And again, hopefully it seemed incredibly simple step by step, and yet suddenly we're looking at slightly more complicated numbers. So what we've got is Theo Riddick, 300% of his seasons, he had over 20 receptions and over 100 touches. So what's going on there? Well, you're probably ahead of me here. This is the error I expected, in that Theo Riddick didn't have over 100 touches in every season he had over 20 receptions, which is a good indication that that player is a heavy used receiving back. And who have we got over here? We've got Theo Riddick, Naheem Hines, John Thompson, that's weird, CJ Process, Jalen Richard. These guys that we actually know have fairly high receiving work, or are mostly receiving backs in the NFL. And then you've got someone like LaShawn McCoy. So that by itself is telling us something about that player. And so if we filter again just to the draft year, just look at the 2019 class, is there anyone sticking out? James Williams is someone we know he's mostly a receiving back. He's not someone that really does a lot of rushing. For example, he's only had over 100 rushing attempts twice. He's never had over 122 in college. And 100% of his seasons with 100 touches or more went for over 20 receptions. I think that's interesting. I think it describes the player well. I also think it's interesting that despite our original list, Madison is the only one that comes up very high in that overall percentage as well. 100% of his seasons when he had over 100 touches, he also had 20 receptions. And so that bodes well as well. Now, these players only had one season with 20 receptions, but they also only had one season with over 100 touches, which is what we said we were looking for when we refiltered. So maybe Dwayne Thompson, who I know nothing else about, really, is someone we want to look at. We could look, if this was the actual database, we could look across his combine measurables or dig in a little harder to what he looks like as a prospect. And yes, Miles Sanders, the guy who was missing, but also we know play behind Saquon Barkley. Whenever he got over 100 touches, he also got 20 receptions. And so that's a little boost to him in our estimation, right? David Montgomery, Mike Weber also rises here, as well as Darrell Henderson. Now, we could test these numbers and go a little further, and we could look at 30 receptions, just however you want to set the threshold. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We've just found it's just a very quick way of finding that information out. And if you were listening to that show, I was listening to it and I was on it, wondering exactly what I was wondering, exactly how many players in this draft class do have over 20 reception seasons. Well, we made that list really easily. And if we want to add more context, it was also pretty simple, just a two-stage process to find out percentages of how many seasons players actually had over 100 touches and 20 receptions. What's the percentage there? There's also another function. I've probably talked about this too long now. But again, I'm just trying to relax before I get back to work. I've got like 3 articles to write, a whole bunch of new projections to look over. That's all stressful. So this is fun. What are we doing on time? Actually can't see the time. Oh, 21 minutes. Yeah, we should definitely hold here. But I did just want to point out, and again, I have done a video on how to use this on my YouTube channel. But you don't have to. You can see how you can just use COUNTIF and do it in separate columns and do a simple divide. Everyone knows plus, add, divide, times from school, obviously. But if you put an S in here, what you're telling it is that you want to count how many if something, but you want to use more than one criteria. So if we put an S in there, what we can say, and Excel and Google Sheets will tell you this, if you click on this button here, or explain what each section of the formula is meant to be, which is always helpful. But anyway, if I add count if and then the letter S, and what I can do is say if the touches is greater or equal to 100, or the receptions in this section is greater than equal to 20. And so instead of making 3 separate columns, what I'm asking it to do is count it by itself. And that should help us get rid of those 300%. And then it's only seasons where they've had over 100 touches does it judge its reception share. And then so everything should be between 0 and 1. 0 and 100%. And so the numbers will start to look, well, you won't have any weird results if you were going to post them or just share them with people. So now we know exactly how many seasons a player had, that many touches and that many receptions. So just another way to use COUNTIF if you add a little S in there. Alright, and again, where I kept all the other running backs in here, if you do all this, then you can check it back based on different draft classes, or you can just delete all the draft classes but for 2019, or like I did, you could just filter. And I have a few 2020 and 2021 prospects in here as well, so we can get some advanced look at that if you're playing Devi or anything like that. Alright, guys, that's all I wanted to do. I was going to take a quick look at it for myself. I wondered how many, if Miles Sanders would raise up if you considered only seasons with 100 touches or more, and he very clearly does. That's easy when you're just looking at one player. You could just go look up his stats on Pro Football Reference's sister site, Sports Football Reference. That's what I did. But when you're trying to get context or know every name in this draft that is interesting because of a particular mark you hear in a podcast, because we've already got all of that in a database and it's sortable, like Pro Football Reference and stuff is great, but it won't let you put your own formulas in or make your own tables that way. So we can just do a simple COUNTIF function, delete everything else to keep it simple, or keep it in there if you then want to compare other players' stats. Just use the whole database, and we get a very simple answer. It would be the same if we were looking at percentage of rushing attempts in their final year, or percentage of receptions in their seasons. Same formula, you just use a different number. Instead of 20, it would be 0.2 if you were looking for over 20%, obviously. So hopefully that's interesting, or just maybe a calmer, easier way into trying to learn or get used to manipulating the database to find answers to questions. I've got all those how-to videos, but just sending you to Excel to practice those formulas, boring as shit. I understand that, and also just I don't think we learn anything unless we're interested in the answer that we're searching for. And so if you have a question like that, and it might not be running back receptions, but it might be how many players in their final season had 1,000 rushing yards and were then successful in the NFL. Well, you can do the COUNTIF function on that as well. And hopefully that'll, whatever your question is, just using that exact same function, that exact same process, make a copy, download it, delete everything else to keep it simple. Will give you an easier way into practicing manipulating the database. I've had comments from people who are studying economics and math and statistics in college that there's a lot in there, Pete. So I understand there is, but I might want to use any of it at any time, or you might. So I could just upload the what I think is relevant. But then if you're interested in TNEA, or if you're interested in receptions for running backs or tight ends, because it's all there, you can just delete the rest, because you're making a copy and not manipulating the master file, so you can just go back and get all the other data again whenever you want. And so that's why I have it set up the way I do. Well, part of the reason anyway. Alright, so I best get out of here before this video gets too big to upload. Thanks again for being on my Patreon page, whether you're Patreoning me or not. Really do appreciate you just coming and checking it out, especially the people that are actually Patreoning me. I'm still blown away by how generous and how grateful I am for the fact that you do that. Seriously, guys and girls, I really appreciate it. Let me know if I can help you out at all. I've had a few requests for data this month. Let me know if you don't get those sheets, because I've done them all and sent them back to you. So if you don't have them, then the email got lost or something, and I'll send it again. Okay, I'm going. Hope you have a nice day. Hope you have a great weekend. And everything else. See you later. Bye.